The mahogany-paneled office smelled faintly of leather and old paper, the kind of room that seemed designed for secrets. I sat stiffly in the back, trying to make myself invisible, while my sister lounged in the chair nearest the lawyer, her designer handbag perched proudly on the table as if it were already part of her inheritance. "According to your parents' will," the lawyer began, voice even and precise, "the estate, including their primary residence, stock portfolio, and liquid assets, valued at approximately $8 million, is to be transferred to your daughter. Caroline?" My sister's lips curled into a smirk. She didn't even try to hide it. Her perfectly manicured nails tapped the table like a drum roll announcing her victory. Around the room, a few relatives exchanged looks, some envious, others approving. No one looked at me. Why would they? I'd been the invisible child all my life. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to keep my expression neutral even as humiliation burned my skin. $8 million. To her. And nothing for me? The lawyer cleared his throat and shuffled a different stack of papers. His voice dropped a note lower, almost conspiratorial. "However, there is one final document your parents instructed me to read separately. It concerns a private trust." For the first time all morning, the room went still. Caroline frowned, her smirk faltering. The lawyer looked directly at me. "This trust, valued significantly higher than the estate, is to be transferred in full to their second child." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. My sister blinked, stunned. And I, forgotten, overlooked, dismissed, suddenly realized the tables had just turned. Growing up, I was never the star of the family. That role belonged to Caroline from the very beginning. She was the golden child, the one who got the newest clothes, the front row applause at every school recital, the endless praise at family dinners. I was the other one, the quiet sibling, the background character in my own home. It wasn't that I lacked ambition. I worked hard, harder than most, in fact. While Caroline breezed through life with doors opened for her, I learned to build my own path. I worked nights to pay for my college textbooks, took on side jobs just to keep the lights on, and learned the value of every single dollar. But no matter how much effort I poured into becoming someone my parents could be proud of, it always seemed to vanish in Caroline's shadow. I remember birthdays where she'd unwrap expensive jewelry while I smiled politely at a sweater 2 sizes too big. Family vacations where she got the window seat on the plane and I got the middle one. Always. Even in conversations, if I tried to share something about my life, it was brushed aside so the spotlight could return to her achievements. Over time, I stopped expecting recognition. I told myself I didn't need it. That hard work and humility mattered more than applause. But deep down, the neglect stung. I craved the same warmth, the same validation my sister received so effortlessly. So when I walked into that lawyer's office, I had no illusions. I wasn't expecting millions or even thousands. I expected nothing, because that's what I'd always been given, and maybe that's why what happened next felt so earth-shattering. Before the reading of the will, my life was simple, humble even. I rented a small 1-bedroom apartment on the edge of town, the kind of place where the heater rattled in the winter and the faucet never stopped dripping, no matter how many times the landlord promised to fix it. But it was mine, and in its imperfect walls, I carved out a life that felt steady, if not glamorous. Most mornings started before sunrise. I'd brew the cheapest coffee I could find at the grocery store, lace up my worn sneakers, and head to work. My job wasn't anything flashy. I managed shifts at a local bookstore, handling inventory, dealing with customers, and keeping the place running when the owner decided to take off early. It wasn't wealth, but it gave me stability, and in a way, books became my escape. Between the shelves, surrounded by stories of adventure and triumph, I could forget for a while that my own story always seemed written in the margins. My circle was small, too. A couple of coworkers who'd share a laugh with me on long days, an elderly neighbor who'd bring me leftover soup when she cooked too much, and a friend or two from college who checked in now and then. I valued loyalty, kindness, and quiet moments, things money couldn't buy. Meanwhile, Caroline's world was loud and dazzling. She threw parties in sprawling homes, flaunted her designer clothes on social media, and collected admirers like souvenirs. Our lives couldn't have been more different. Yet somehow I'd convinced myself that was okay. I wasn't chasing wealth or status. All I wanted was a sense of fairness, a sign that just once I mattered as much as she did. Little did I know that craving was about to collide with a truth no one in my family could have imagined. Losing my parents was painful enough. We hadn't always been close, but they were still my anchor, the thread tying me to something bigger than myself. When they passed within months of each other, the grief came in waves I wasn't prepared for. And yet before I'd even had the chance to heal, the focus shifted, not on memories, not on mourning, but on money. The day of the will reading, Caroline arrived like it was her coronation. She wore a silk dress and diamond earrings that sparkled under the office lights, her perfume wafting through the room like a silent announcement of superiority. I sat quietly in the corner, my hands folded, heart heavy but calm. I thought, maybe, just maybe, this would be the one time things would feel even. The lawyer's voice carried no emotion as he read the formal language of the will. To our beloved daughter Caroline, we leave the family home, our full stock portfolio, and all liquid assets. Valuation, approximately $8 million. A wave of whispers rippled through the room. Caroline gasped dramatically, covering her mouth with a manicured hand, though her eyes glimmered with satisfaction. She shot me a sideways glance, and I caught the faint smirk tugging at her lips. Nothing was said about me. Not one word. Caroline leaned back in her chair, basking in the spotlight. "Well," she said sweetly, loud enough for everyone to hear. I suppose Mom and Dad knew who the responsible one was. Someone had to carry the family legacy. A couple of relatives chuckled nervously, nodding as though her arrogance was wisdom. Others looked at me with a mixture of pity and dismissal, like I was a stray cat hovering on the doorstep, unwanted but tolerated. My chest tightened. I wasn't shocked, not really. This had been the pattern all my life, her reward, my neglect. Still, the sting was unbearable. To be erased, even in death, by the very people who had raised me. It was a wound deeper than money could measure. In that moment, humiliation and grief twisted together into something sharper. I told myself to breathe, to endure, but inside, one thought burned hotter than all the rest. How much more would I have to lose before I finally mattered? In the days after the will reading, I carried a heaviness that no one else seemed to notice. Caroline was busy celebrating her new life of luxury, throwing a champagne party in the family home that now belonged solely to her. Photos flooded social media. Her holding a glass of rosé by the pool captioned, "New chapter, same queen energy." Dozens of her friends cheered her on in the comments, while I sat in my dim apartment, scrolling with a knot in my stomach. Everywhere I looked, her wealth was flaunted like a trophy. She bought a brand new sports car and made sure to drive past my bookstore one afternoon, honking as if to remind me who the real winner was. She posted shopping sprees at designer boutiques, vacations in places I'd only ever seen in travel magazines, and dinners at restaurants where the bill probably matched my monthly rent. Meanwhile, my own life felt like it was unraveling. The rent check bounced once, and I had to beg my landlord for an extension. My credit card bill grew heavier each month, weighed down by groceries and overdue medical expenses. Even at work, I was stretched thin, covering double shifts because another employee had quit. My manager sighing at me like I was somehow responsible for the store's struggles. Every time Caroline called, it wasn't to check on me. It was to rub salt in the wound. "You really should have tried harder to make Mom and Dad proud," she'd say with mock sympathy. "But hey, not everyone's cut out for success." Her words cut deeper than any financial burden. It wasn't just about the money. It was about being erased, diminished, made to feel like nothing. One night, I sat at my tiny kitchen table surrounded by overdue bills, my head in my hands. For the first time, I wondered if this was all my life would ever be. Shadows, scraps, and silence while my sister basked in the spotlight. I didn't know then that rock bottom wasn't the end of my story. It was the foundation for something greater, something she would never see coming. A week after the humiliating will reading, I got a call I almost ignored. It was the lawyer. His tone was calm but urgent. "I need you to come back to my office. There's something we didn't discuss in front of your sister." My first instinct was disbelief. Hadn't everything already been decided? I nearly told him not to waste my time, but something in his voice made me agree. When I arrived, the office was empty except for him and a locked drawer he carefully opened. He slid a sealed envelope across the polished desk, his eyes meeting mine with a strange mixture of duty and sympathy. "Your parents left a separate document, a codicil that was to be revealed only to you." I tore it open with trembling hands. Inside was a letter, handwritten unmistakably my father's scrawl. "To our quiet fighter," it began. "We know life has not always seemed fair, but fairness has a way of finding its place in time. This trust is yours alone. Use it wisely." The lawyer explained what the letter only hinted at. My parents had set up a private trust in my name years ago, one Caroline didn't know existed. While she inherited the visible fortune, I had been left something far greater, a series of investments, properties, and accounts that, combined, exceeded her $8 million several times over. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. All the years of neglect, of being overlooked, had led to this hidden truth. Caroline thought she had won. She thought I was nothing. But in reality, I was the one holding the real power, and I knew then I wasn't going to waste it. The first night after learning about the trust, I barely slept. My mind spun between disbelief and possibility. One moment I felt giddy, imagining the look on Caroline's face when she realized she wasn't the only heir. The next I felt cautious. This fortune wasn't just money, it was power. And power, I decided, was best used in silence, so I didn't tell a soul. Not my coworkers, not my neighbors, not even the friends who occasionally checked in, and certainly not Caroline. To her, I remained the same overlooked sibling, the one living paycheck to paycheck, still scraping by while she paraded her victory to the world. Meanwhile, I started making quiet moves. I visited the properties listed in the trust, apartment complexes generating steady rental income, a small strip mall tucked away in the suburbs, even a forgotten piece of farmland my parents had wisely held on to. Each discovery made my chest tighten with awe. My parents had planned this carefully, as though they knew Caroline would gloat and I would need something deeper than instant wealth. I didn't go out and buy a flashy car or a mansion. Instead, I cleared my debts, paid my rent a year in advance, and tucked away enough to breathe freely for the first time in my life. Then I began investing carefully, expanding what was already mine, all while keeping my outward life modest. Caroline continued to flaunt her millions, boasting at family gatherings and splashing her fortune across Instagram. "I guess some people just aren't cut out for success," she'd tease, looking at me with that smug little grin. If only she knew. I smiled politely, biting back the truth. The longer she underestimated me, the sweeter the moment of reckoning would be. Because I wasn't just going to match her fortune, I was going to surpass it. Quietly, strategically. Until the day came when she would realize the sibling she mocked was the one who truly won. And when that day came, I planned to save her every second. Caroline's wealth burned like a fire, loud, bright, and fast. Within months, her Instagram was a highlight reel of excess. Luxury handbags piled on marble counters, champagne poured into crystal fountains, weekend trips to Paris, just because. She was intoxicated by the attention. But underneath the gloss, cracks began to show. Her spending outpaced her income. The house she inherited came with steep property taxes she hadn't bothered to calculate. The stock portfolio, her biggest prize, was something she had no clue how to manage, and her rash trades drained more than they earned. Creditors began circling, though she dismissed them with the same arrogance she used on me. That was when I began to make my moves. Quiet, careful, surgical. I bought into businesses she frequented, sometimes outright acquiring controlling shares. The boutique she bragged about shopping at? Mine? The upscale restaurant where she loved to host friends? I signed the ownership papers and let her run up tabs she thought were free, without realizing every dollar went back to me. But my most calculated strike came when I discovered her mountain of debt. She had borrowed against her assets to fund her lifestyle, and her loans had been bundled and sold. I tracked them down and purchased them outright, becoming her biggest creditor without her ever knowing. The confrontation came one evening when she swaggered into a family dinner, dripping in gold jewelry, mocking me for showing up in my modest clothes. She raised her glass to success and to knowing how to handle it. That was my moment. Calmly, I slid a folder across the table. Inside, the deeds to properties she thought were hers to flaunt, the contracts showing her debts now belonged to me, and the numbers proving my fortune surpassed hers several times over. Her laughter froze. Her glass wobbled. She flipped through the pages, face draining of color. This can't be real, but it was. And in that silence, with every relative staring wide-eyed, I leaned in and said softly, "Turns out the quiet sibling knew how to handle it after all." Caroline's smirk was gone. The crown she thought untouchable had slipped, and I was the one holding it now. The silence after my revelation was deafening. My relatives, who once looked at me with pity, now stared as though seeing me for the first time. Caroline, usually so composed, stammered, her cheeks blotched red with humiliation. She shoved the folder back at me, as though denying it would make it untrue, but the truth was undeniable. Her debts were mine to call in, her favorite haunts now operated under my ownership, and her illusion of superiority had been shattered in front of the very audience she craved. The ripple effect was immediate. Friends who once clung to her for the perks began to drift away, whispering behind her back about recklessness and arrogance. Family members who had always praised her turned their conversations toward me, asking questions, offering congratulations, treating me with the respect I had quietly longed for. Caroline, stripped of her financial armor, grew smaller in every sense. The sports car vanished, the lavish vacations stopped, and her social media went eerily quiet. The queen without her crown had nothing left to flaunt. As for me, I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Walking out of that dinner, head held high, I felt a power I had never known. Not because of the fortune itself, but because I had finally been seen, finally proven. I had spent my life in the shadows, underestimated, overlooked. But now the balance had shifted. Caroline's downfall wasn't my greatest victory. My greatest victory was realizing I'd never needed her approval, or anyone else's, to define my worth. And that truth was worth more than every dollar in the world. In the weeks that followed, I found myself reflecting more than celebrating. Yes, the fortune changed everything about my financial situation. I no longer worried about overdue bills or whether I could afford groceries. But the true shift wasn't in my bank account. It was inside me. For so long, I had equated worth with recognition. I thought if my parents, or my sister, or even society acknowledged me, then I'd finally matter. But standing on the other side of humiliation and vindication, I realized something profound. I had always mattered. My quiet resilience, my ability to survive without praise, my strength to build a life from scraps, that was worth more than any inheritance. The trust my parents left wasn't just about money. It was about acknowledgement. Maybe they didn't show it in ways I craved while they were alive, but in the end they saw me. They saw the fighter I had become, the one who never needed the spotlight to prove their value. And Caroline? She became the cautionary tale. Her downfall taught me that arrogance burns out quickly, but humility endures. She underestimated me, the forgotten sibling, and it cost her everything she thought she had secured. If there's one lesson I carry now, it's this. Never assume silence means weakness. Some of the strongest battles are fought quietly, without applause, without an audience. And when the time comes, the quiet ones can rise louder than anyone ever expected. So yes, the fortune gave me freedom. But the real treasure was the clarity it brought. That my worth was never up for debate. It had been there all along, waiting for me to recognize it. And now, I finally do. And that's where my story comes to a close. But now I want to turn the spotlight over to you. Have you ever been underestimated? Treated unfairly? Made to feel like your voice, your effort, or even your very presence didn't matter? If so, I'd love to hear your story. Share it in the comments below. because sometimes the most powerful tales are the ones that come from real people who've been through it all. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Every week I share more tales of betrayal, revenge, and karmic justice that prove one thing: no one gets away with cruelty forever. By subscribing, you won't just get more stories. You'll join a community that believes in standing up, fighting back, and finding satisfaction when life finally flips the script. And if you enjoyed this video, give it a like. It helps more people discover these stories and reminds me that you're out there listening, rooting for justice just as much as I am. Because at the end of the day, revenge stories aren't just about payback. They're about hope. They're about knowing that even the overlooked, underestimated, and forgotten can rise in ways no one expects. Never forget. Sometimes the quietest sibling holds the loudest fortune.